Shana Tova on this second beautiful day of 5783. We're so glad you're here with us. I hope the new year has so far been sweet to you and your families. As I mentioned yesterday morning in my sermon, this year during the High Holy Days, I want to talk with you about the 7 enduring sermons that every rabbi has inside of them. All the other sermons a rabbi may give is, my teacher contended, but a variation on a theme. This morning, on the second day of Rosh Hashana, I want to share with you one of the lessons from my sermons throughout the years that I believe is still vitally important and relevant today. And that is the importance of tending to your Jewish education. Wait, you say. I went to Hebrew school. I had a bat mitzvah. Some of you even went to day school. That should be enough. The sad truth is that the state of Jewish literacy is perhaps some of the worst in generations, particularly here in North America, and particularly among those of us liberal Jews. Jewish education, Jewish knowledge, and literacy is at an all-time low. I think we're losing our way because we don't even know how to read the Jewish map. In a few minutes, we'll hear a beautiful and complex Torah portion chanted perfectly by Nancy Cohen, one of the most knowledgeable Jews that I know. You always feel embarrassed when I call attention to how beautiful you chant Torah and your love of Torah. We will read the second portion for Rosh Hashanah morning, which is the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, a kind of harrowing story. But my friends, if you don't have a Jewish education, you really can't understand or even begin to understand this story, its many nuances, its complexities. The way the Hebrew word hineni, behold, I am here, I am present, echoes throughout the story. The dialogue through the generations of rabbinic commentary about this very portion, like Rashi, who takes God's call to Abraham to take your only son up to Mount Moriah and offer as a sacrifice. You see, in Rashi's retelling of the story, it becomes an entirely different scenario. God says, take your son, comma, and Abraham replies, but I have 2 sons. And God says, your only son. And Abraham says, I have 2 sons, and each are the only son of their mother. You see, Rashi fills in a dialogue at the commas, at the story of what is just one sentence that you will hear chanted in our Parsha this morning. But without curiosity, without a deeper understanding, this story, horrifying as it is, that a father would sacrifice his only son, you would never know without a Jewish education that in the next Torah portion, in the next Parsha, which is Chayei Sarah, called the life of Sarah, that our rabbis teach that Sarah dies of a broken heart about what happened between Abraham and Isaac. The rabbis of our tradition recognize the trauma and horror of such a situation, even if it wasn't carried through. But without an ongoing Jewish education as an adult, Judaism remains fixed at your 13-year-old self. And we come to this story year after year, on Rosh Hashana, on the second day, and later again in a few weeks when it comes in the regular cycle of reading. We come with a little chance to understand the ways it has been interpreted and how it has shaped our story, our history, and even the history of the world. Did you know that the story of the binding of Isaac is as similar to the story in the Quran? But there it is in Isaac, it is Ishmael, the other son of Abraham and Hagar, who we read about yesterday. The son from whom the Arab people claim their heritage. And that in Islam there is a festival dedicated to that very moment called Eid al-Adha. But without a Jewish education, you wouldn't know this either. That Abraham is the progenitor of both Jewish people and the Arab people. And did you know that even Christianity usurps the story of a father sacrificing the son in the story of Jesus on the cross? But unless you know the Jewish story and some of the midrashim, the stories that the rabbis wrote surrounding it, you wouldn't know that in one midrash, Abraham actually goes through with the sacrifice. Then you can't understand the development of Christianity and the appropriation of our core story. In the Torah, Isaac is a passive figure. But in the Midrash, Isaac becomes the hero with a strong voice. But unless you know and have studied this story through the lens of Jewish tradition, you can't begin to unpack it and what it means to the Jewish people. Without a Jewish education, you don't even understand the way that Nancy will chant it in a few moments, with special musical notations passed down through the ages, the trope, the cantillation, which has its own way, as Nancy has taught us so often on Shabbat morning, its own way of interpreting the text itself. Without an adult Jewish education, it's difficult to even understand the flow of the prayers, why they are there in our machzor or on our siddur, the order that they are in, the message behind the shofar blasts, the process of teshuvah that we are taught. Hear this in this Talmud story retold. In 64 CE, 6 years before the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70, the high priest Yehoshua ben Gamliel instituted a law that teachers should be appointed in every province, in every town, and that all children above the ages of 6 or 7 were to be placed in their charge. Attendance was obligatory up to the age of 13. Girls were excluded from this instruction, but they were often taught privately, for the yearning for education was a kindling force that reached out in different forms to all strata of people. Primary schools were established in cities and towns and villages, even in little hamlets. The public response to the institution of the Talmud Torah, which in the beginning was also called a Beit Sefer, the house of the books, was one of religious and patriotic enthusiasm. The confident declaration by Jewish educators in the Talmud was, so long as the voice of the children of Jacob are heard studying Torah in schools, the hand of Esau will not be able to prevail against them. In other words, a Jewish education is essential, even from more than 2,000 years ago, to combat the enemies of the Jewish people. Today, our lack of understanding is adding to the rising hate and anti-Semitism that surround us. When we Jews do not even understand the stereotypes that are used against us, the memes and the anti-Semitic tropes, the hateful rhetoric that the far left and the far right you both use, we become powerless to change and challenge that hatred. The high priest of more than 2,000 years ago recognized that Jewish education was a way to build a hedge around those who would do us harm. And you need to know it, because anti-Semitism is indeed still present, but too often many of us don't even know when we see it. But Jewish literacy is more than just combating anti-Semitism. It deepens our ability to be uplifted spiritually. It brings beauty to our lives, a deeper appreciation for our history, our story, our people. Jewish knowledge equips us with the confidence to face a more diverse Jewish world. To understand that when we want to bring together the best of our secular education alongside the knowledge we seek for Jewish meaning and purpose, we can catapult ourselves and build hope for the future. The Hasidim have the opposite problem. That blockbuster New York Times report of just a couple of weeks ago highlighted the poor secular education, if any, that has been given to hordes of young Haredi, black hat Jewish boys and men in our own country and in Israel. They learn Jewish texts and Jewish thinking, but they can't subtract or add or multiply or divide. They have no knowledge of science or chemistry, biology, let alone philosophy. American or world literature, geography, psychology, or art history, their minds are being starved in a different way. They are ill-equipped to live in the 21st century and take as the holy words their rabbi's words without being able to decide for themselves. But for most liberal Jews in North America, we don't know our Talmud from our Midrash, Tisha B'Av from Tu B'Shvat, let alone the beauty of a Malave Malka on Shabbat afternoon, or enough Hebrew to understand the prayer book. We are Jews who seemingly don't value learning. Even though we all have heard, oh, Jews value education. It's one of the most important Jewish values. And we do. We attend university in higher percentages than the average population and than other religious ethnic groups. We hold more PhDs and master degrees, often in our secular education, while at the same time our Jewish education has been woefully neglected. Jews are 23% of Nobel Prizes, but most of us here can't answer the basic questions for the annual International Bible Contest sponsored by the Jewish Agency for Israel. That axiom that Jewish education is one of the most important values is taken seriously actually in South Korea, where Talmud study is off the charts. According to my friend, Ambassador Akiva Tor, who is the ambassador to South Korea, even though there are very few Jews in South Korea, Talmud study and Jewish style study is part of the very fabric of Korean education. Ambassador Tor used to be our consul general in San Francisco before his appointment to the ambassadorship of Korea. According to Korean educational researcher Seol Dong-ju, Koreans don't have to emulate Jewish belief systems, but we do need to copy the way Jews teach their children, he said. According to this article in the Times of Israel from the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, the result is dozens of private Chavruta-themed academies with busy branches in major cities throughout the country, catering from everyone from toddlers to adults. Some make use of Korean language Talmud texts, while others follow an entirely secular curriculum. Kim Jong-won, who directs one such academy called the Chavruta Culture Association, explains that South Korea's Jewish education quest is over 40 years old. It began in the mid-1970s when Korean translation of Talmud-inspired stories by Rabbi Marvin Tokayer, who was an American military chaplain stationed in Japan, first arrived in Seoul bookstores. In the decades since, hundreds of Korean versions of the Talmud have appeared, mostly deriving from English language translations and commentaries. These range from picture story books for children to thicker, more ponderous volumes for adults. And as Kim Jong-won explained, interest in the Talmud eventually led Korean academies to explore how Jews study religious texts. They began to learn about yeshivas, academies that are devoted to Talmud scholarship, and the particular style of having a chavruta, a study partner. South Korean consultants paid visits to some of Israel's busiest Talmud centers. And in the methodology of chavruta, you have your chavruta, your study partner. And you begin to explore first in private academies, and then it blew up into public school systems in Korea. Some study Talmud, and some add in secular studies as well, using the same style. The academic pressure in Korea is very intense, as every child must prepare and study for what is known as the Sunyum, the name of the dreaded college scholastic ability test, which is an 8-hour marathon of back-to-back exams that can affect not only if they go to college, but future employment and marriage prospects as well. The Jewish emphasis and value on education and the style of traditional preparation of Jewish education is a noisy back and forth with your study partner. It is proven in Korea to be a dramatic, positive addition to learning, and even in a place where there are very few Jews, they have developed a love of Jewish ideas, Jewish books, Jewish study, a love of Israel, and all things Jewish, even if that is not their heritage. Can we do no less as the inheritors of Jewish tradition and Jewish teachings? Throughout my rabbinate, I've tried to encourage you to learn more about Judaism, to do so as an adult learner, to find relevance in our tradition and find beauty and breadth in Jewish knowledge. I've tried to model learning by being a learner myself and bringing to our congregation a variety of teachers and authors and movies, experts on Israel, and by offering many different kinds of classes. I've encouraged you, and sometimes like today, cajoled you a bit to dive deeper, to make your learning, as our tradition says, regular and fixed, a part of your Jewish practice. It's called Torah Lishma. Torah for no other reason than just to learn, to grow and develop. Not to get a degree, not to get ahead at work, but just for learning's sake. What a beautiful idea that's embedded in our tradition, our Judaism. Judaism wants you to grow and continue to develop as a human being. It recognizes that you aren't fixed in stone. And yet, sadly, for many Jews, if they even had a Jewish education, it stopped and was fixed at age 13. And even though we have grown and matured through the years, our Judaism somehow didn't. No wonder so many Jewish people feel as if Judaism doesn't speak to them. They haven't had it speak to them as an adult. I wouldn't want my 13-year-old self to govern who I am today. You see, those folks have stopped growing spiritually, Jewishly, when they haven't cracked open any book of Jewish learning. My friends, the secret to spiritual growth as a Jew is actually to continue to study, to question, to read our sages, and yes, to argue with the sages, to explore the ideas of our people, and add your own. As the new year begins, we have a chance to reset our lives, reset our souls, and reset the way we do things. This year, make it your year of devotion to a year of study of the Jewish way of life. Renew and rekindle Jewish learning. Take a Jewish class in person or online. Read a Jewish book. Find yourself a teacher. As the Pirkei Avot tells us, Aseh lecha rav, aseh lecha chaver. Appoint for yourself a teacher. Acquire a study partner. In other words, find a teacher, Jewish teachers, and find a partner you can study with. You don't have to be married to them. You don't have to live with them. They don't even have to be in the same city anymore. But find someone that you can bounce Jewish ideas off of. Discuss that book. Discuss that page of Talmud. They will encourage you, cajole you, and help you grow to be your best self. You can study here in our congregation, or at Shalom Hartman, or Pardes in Israel. You can study with them online or take a class at American Jewish University. But whatever you do, don't sacrifice our tradition on a bed of your ignorance. Keep our faith alive in you. Keep the stories alive and keep the values alive by deepening your own Jewish knowledge and Jewish learning. The story of Abraham and Isaac and his near sacrifice that we will read in just a few minutes teaches us many things, including that we Jews have an anathema to child sacrifice, which was the way of the pagan religions of the ancient Near East. But our lack of Jewish education, not only in today's youth, but in ourselves as well, will sacrifice the future of Judaism. Hineni, let us answer the call to Jewish learning, to Jewish education. Hineni, that's how Abraham answered the call. Hineni, I am here and I am ready. May you be ready as well. Ken Yehi Ratzon, so may it be God's will.
Amen.